The heavy maple door swung open and groaned like an old ship hull cutting through black water. 1 week had passed since the funeral, yet the Anderson house on Willowbend Crescent hadn't known a single quiet hour. The air still held the ghost of lilies and raincoats. What it no longer held was kindness. Lily Anderson, 6 years old, hair in a crooked braid her mother used to fix each morning, stood in the doorway, clutching a small purple suitcase. The suitcase was heavier than she remembered. Maybe grief adds weight to everything. She pressed it to her chest as if it were a shield. The spring sky over Toronto was the color of cold dishwater. A damp wind ran invisible fingers across the lawn, rattling the hedge and the tin mailbox with their family name painted on it, Anderson. The letters looked too big now, like they belonged to a different life. Richard Anderson. Her stepfather, slumped in the leather armchair, his striped green and yellow shirt creased, his jaw shadowed, his eyes glassy with liquor. Once, he used to lift Lily and spin her round until both of them fell onto the sofa in giggles. Once, he read bedtime books about curious bears and brave trains and always changed his voice for the silly parts. That had been before hospital corridors, infusion pumps, prayers that felt like stones, and a goodbye that split their house in two. "You are not my child," he snarled, voice raw, words wobbling like a glass on a shaking table. "You're a burden I can't carry out now." Lily's fingers tightened on the suitcase handle until they went white. "I can help," she whispered. "Mom taught me how to make porridge. I'll study quiet. I promise I'll be good. Quiet." Richard lurched forward, the ice clinking in his tumbler. "Every corner of this house screams of her. Your shoes, your drawings, your little." His gaze snagged on the teddy bear tucked under Lily's elbow, the one with the stitched blue star on its stomach. "Get out." A hand with immaculate nails touched Richard's sleeve. "Richard, please," said Monica Blake, the cousin of Lily's late mother. The cherry red dress, the perfume too sweet for the room, the hair in blonde ribbons. She looked like sympathy packaged in a department store window. But her eyes slid over Lily like a knife over fondant, neat, precise, leaving no mark you could point to later. "She's only a child. Don't frighten her." Lily lifted her chin at the tone beneath the sugar. She was young, not blind. Monica's smile never reached her eyes. Richard stood too fast. The room tilted. He caught himself against the arm of the chair, then stumbled toward Lily. The movement, the volume, the adult storm gathering in the doorway. Something in Lily flinched. She took a step back. Her heel caught the raised edge of the foyer rug. The suitcase burst when she fell. It split like a mouth, and all her little life tumbled out. The socks her mother had folded warm against the radiator. A blue sweater pilled at the elbows. A half-finished coloring book, the purple crayon snapped in two. The teddy bear bounced, rolled, and settled on the tile as if fainting. Lily stayed on her knees as the world scattered. Through the hedge, neighbors watched without watching. Curtains shifted. A cough echoed from somewhere. A lamppost flicked on, though it wasn't dark yet. Toronto is polite, people say. Polite enough to pretend not to see. Polite enough to talk later, in kitchens smelling of tea, about how awful it all was. "Please," Lily said, gathering socks with fingers that wouldn't obey. Dust smeared her knees. Her dress had the faint grass stain from the cemetery still on the hem. Her voice hit a wall and came back small. "Please, Richard, don't turn off all the lights tonight. It's scary when the hallway goes black. Don't call me that." He pointed at the door, at the street, at a future Lily couldn't see. "Go." Monica crouched, skirt rustling like candy wrappers, and began plucking Lily's clothes from the floor. "Poor dear," she murmured, almost tender. "Come now, up you get." She tucked the sweater into the suitcase as if tidying was mercy. When she stood, she smoothed her dress and glanced at Richard with a look Lily couldn't yet translate. A look of deals struck and doors closing. A car rolled to a stop by the curb, quiet as if it respected the ache of the street. Not a rumbling truck, not a flashy parade. Just a dark sedan with windows that reflected the trembling boughs above. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. He wasn't tall the way heroes are in cartoons. He was ordinary tall, with a coat the color of rain and a tired, attentive face. There was something unhurried about him, like the way a nurse adjusts a blanket without making a sound. He took in the tableau in one glance, the man with the glass and the shaking hand, the woman in red arranging compassion into neat piles, the child on her knees trying to stitch her little life back together with the wrong kind of thread. He crossed the walk. No one stopped him. The air itself seemed to make room. He knelt so his eyes were level with Lily's. The foyer smelled of old wood and spilled whiskey, and the ghost of Lily's. He reached for the teddy bear, brushed dust from its blue star with the cuff of his sleeve, and placed it gently into Lily's hands. "Hello," he said. His voice was low and steady, the way people talk near sleeping babies and hospital beds. "I'm Thomas Miller." Richard straightened, bristling. "Who are you to walk into my house?" "Your late wife's friend," Thomas answered, not looking away from Lily. "The one she asked to look in on her daughter if the worst ever happened." Monica's mouth made a small, delicate O of surprise. "Did Sarah know you were coming?" "She doesn't know anything anymore," Richard snapped, the rage so close to grief it was almost indistinguishable. He lifted the glass as if it could shield him. "And this is my house." Thomas's eyes moved to Richard then, calm as a lake in February. "And that is a little girl," he said, crying on the floor. The house went quiet enough to hear the furnace click on. A gull cried somewhere overhead, stupidly lost away from the lake. On the hedge, water beads trembled and did not fall. Thomas looked back at Lily. "From now on," he said, each word clear as a bell struck once, "you are coming with me." The sentence seemed to land in the room like a sheet of warm light. Lily's shoulders, hunched for so long they might have forgotten any other shape, loosened a fraction. She blinked as if she had heard wind chimes from very far away. Richard laughed, a dry sound. "You can't just take her. There are laws." "There are," Thomas agreed softly. "And they protect children first." Monica's smile returned, thin as a paper cut. "Let's not make a scene on the porch," she murmured, as if scenes were untidy things that stained reputations. "Mr. Miller, surely we can arrange." Thomas didn't bargain. He rose and began gathering Lily's things with the care of a librarian handling an old book, socks, sweater, coloring book with the broken purple crayon. He clicked the suitcase shut and set it upright beside the child. He held out his hand but didn't touch her. He let the invitation hang there like a bridge someone could choose to cross. Lily stared at the hand. Her own were gritty with dust and fear. In the very center of her chest something felt like a string pulled too tight. She looked past Thomas at the street, at the car, at a possibility that didn't bruise. Then, slowly, she put her small hand in his. It was warm. That was all. Not magic, not fireworks. Warm like a mug left ready on a table when the weather turns. "Get off my property," Richard said. But the words had mislaid their fangs. He didn't step forward. He didn't do anything at all. Thomas guided Lily across the threshold. The spring light made the dust motes glitter around them like tiny drifting seeds. At the curb, he opened the rear door and helped her in, buckling the seatbelt with the practiced gentleness of someone who respects small bones. He set the teddy bear in her lap and the suitcase at her feet. "We'll get you something hot to drink," he said, in a quiet room where the hall light stays on. Lily's eyes flicked to the house. In the window, the curtains shifted, faces that weren't faces, lives that weren't hers. Monica appeared on the porch with a hand lifted in a theatrical half-wave, then let it fall when no one looked. Richard stood behind the screen door, a figure cut out of gloom, holding a glass like a nightlight. Thomas closed the car door. He walked around to the other side and slid into the front seat. For a moment, he didn't start the engine. He just sat there with his hands on the wheel and his head tipped slightly back, as if aligning himself with something straight and old and true, like a plumb line. He turned, met Lily's eyes in the rearview mirror, and spoke the way a person lowers their voice in a cathedral. "My name is Thomas," he said. "Your mom talked about you." "A lot," Lily swallowed. Her throat felt like paper. "My name is Lily," she whispered. "I know." He smiled small, sad, certain. "You're not alone." He pulled away from the curb. The house shrank in the mirror, porch, hedge, rattling mailbox, a man with a drink, a woman in red. The street opened into the city streetcars humming on Queen, shopfronts with chalkboard menus, puddles that held pieces of sky. Toronto moved around them with its usual quiet grace. A city that has seen storms and keeps making T-Dot in the back seat. Lily hugged the bear. The blue star was cool under her thumb. She didn't cry. She watched the city slide by and listened to the engine. Steady as a heartbeat she could borrow for a while. The wind lifted her braid like a friendly hand and laid it down again. Somewhere between one intersection and the next, between a house that had emptied and a promise that had just been spoken, Lily let herself breathe all the way in, then all the way out. The sound filled the car, soft and ordinary and miraculous. Thomas adjusted the mirror slightly, so he could see her without turning. "We'll talk when you're ready," he said. "And until then, we'll keep the hallway light on." The car glided down Queen Street under the soft glow of street lamps. Toronto was alive in its usual quiet rhythm, streetcars clattering, bicycles slipping through traffic, neon signs buzzing outside corner diners. Yet inside the car, it felt as if time had folded into a pocket. Lily sat still, her knees drawn up beneath her chin, her teddy bear pressed like a heartbeat against her chest. She said nothing, but her wide eyes in the mirror never left the man in the driver's seat. Thomas Miller kept his hands steady on the wheel. Every so often, he glanced back at her reflection. He didn't push. He didn't fill the silence with questions or coaxing. He simply drove, letting the quiet wrap around them like a blanket. The city gradually thinned, street lamps giving way to long stretches of highway lined with trees, their shadows swaying in the cold night wind. "Would you like some hot chocolate?" he asked finally, his voice low, as if offering her a secret. Lily hesitated, then nodded once. Her lips pressed together as though even nodding was a risk. 15 minutes later, the Bentley pulled into a small cafe still open near the highway. It smelled of cinnamon and maple syrup. Thomas ordered 2 hot chocolates, extra whipped cream for both. When the steaming cup landed on the table, Lily wrapped her hands around it but didn't drink. She kept her eyes on the swirl of cream melting into dark liquid, as though it might disappear if she blinked. Thomas sipped his own slowly. "When I was about your age," he began, "I had to leave the only place I knew. I grew up in an orphanage in Montreal. There were days I felt invisible, like no one even noticed whether I was there or not." Lily lifted her eyes just enough to meet his. Cautious, but then, Thomas continued, "Your mom, back when she was younger than I am now, she was the one who saw me. She believed I could be more than a boy without a family. That belief kept me alive." The whipped cream slipped into the chocolate with a soft plop. Lily finally took a sip, her small hands trembling as she lifted the cup. She sipped so carefully, as if spilling even a drop might cost her everything. "My mom," Lily whispered, her voice breaking on the word. "She said you were her best friend." Thomas smiled, faint and sorrowful, but certain. "She was mine, too. And before she left, she asked me for one promise. She said, 'Thomas, if anything happens, make sure Lily isn't alone.'" The girl's throat tightened. She bent her head quickly, hiding her face behind the rim of the cup. Thomas leaned forward slightly, softening his tone even more. "I'm not here to replace your dad. I'm here to keep a promise and to keep you safe." Hours later, the Bentley rolled into a quiet neighborhood just outside Chicago. The Miller estate stood like something from a storybook: brick walls, tall gables, vines hugging the stone, and a warm amber glow spilling from the windows. It wasn't a palace. It was steadiness made into architecture. Inside, the air smelled faintly of fresh bread and lavender polish. A woman in her 60s, silver hair in a neat bun, wearing a crisp apron, waited by the door. Her presence felt like the calm of a grandmother without the fuss. "Welcome home," she said gently, her eyes resting on Lily with no question, no judgment. "I'm Mrs. Green. Supper is ready: chicken soup, toasted bread, and warm milk." Lily stood half hidden behind Thomas's coat sleeve, clutching her teddy bear. She wasn't ready to believe this was home. Homes, she knew, had a way of turning sharp. Thomas crouched again, so his eyes met hers at level. "This is Mrs. Green. She's like family to me. Tonight, she'll be like family to you too." Mrs. Green knelt, sliding a steaming bowl across the polished table. "Eat slowly, darling," she said softly. "No one's rushing you here." Lily climbed onto the chair cautiously, placing her bear beside the bowl. She lifted the spoon, stirred once, then set it back down. For a long moment she didn't touch it at all. The silence stretched thin, trembling with unspoken weight. Then, all at once, the dam broke. Hot tears spilled down her cheeks, falling silently into the soup. She buried her face in her hands. "I just want my dad back," she sobbed, her small shoulders shaking. "Not Richard, the real one. The one who carried me on his back and bought me ice cream." Thomas's chest tightened, but he kept his voice steady. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver star, smooth and cool against his palm. He placed it on the table before her. "This was given to me when I was your age," he explained. "Someone once told me, when you're scared, hold it tight and remember that someone believes in you. I've carried it all my life. Now, I want you to have it." Lily touched the star with her fingertip, then pulled her hand back quickly, as though afraid it might vanish. She looked up, her eyes rimmed red but searching. If Richard wants to see me again, what will happen?" Thomas rested his hand lightly on the back of her chair, careful not to startle her. "First of all, you need to be safe. The rest is for the adults to handle me, the police, the court. You don't have to fight that battle alone." The girl blinked, slowly. For the first time since the house on Willowbend Crescent, her breathing eased into something less frantic. She nodded once, hugging the teddy bear tight. That night, as the clock ticked past midnight, Lily fell asleep in the guest room upstairs with the hall light on just as Thomas promised. Downstairs, Thomas sat in his study, the silver star now absent from his pocket. On his desk lay an unopened folder and a faded photograph, Sarah, Lily's mother, leaning against his shoulder with a smile as bright as summer. His phone buzzed with a new message from Detective Carla Johnson. "Do you need me to set up a meeting with the family court judge? Also, Dr. Leah Simmons can see Lily tomorrow morning." Thomas typed back with steady fingers. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Thank you. Keep everything ready. We'll need the law on our side." The following morning in Chicago, the air was sharp and cool, carrying the faint bite of late spring. The Miller estate felt calm, birds darting between the oak trees. Morning sun filtering across the stone terrace, but inside Thomas's study, a storm was gathering on paper. On his desk lay a pile of documents forwarded overnight from Toronto. Financial statements, property deeds, trust accounts, everything Sarah had left behind for Lily's future. Thomas leafed through them, his jaw tightening as he saw gaps, inconsistencies. It was as if someone had been siphoning small streams of wealth away from the child's inheritance. "Monica," he muttered under his breath. The cousin in the red dress. He had seen the look in her eyes the night before. The one Lily had noticed too. It wasn't pity, it was calculation. Downstairs, Mrs. Green guided Lily to the breakfast table where toast, scrambled eggs, and warm milk waited. The little girl sat stiffly, still hugging her teddy bear even as she nibbled at the bread. For every bite she took, her eyes flicked toward the hallway. Half expecting someone to burst in and shout her name, Thomas came down, his expression softening when he saw her. "Eat what you can," he told her gently. "We've got an appointment this morning with a friend of mine. She's a doctor who talks to kids. Nothing scary. Just talking." Lily nodded, though her shoulders remained tight. The silver star Thomas had given her lay on the table beside her plate. Every so often she touched it with the tip of her finger, as if checking that it was still real. Far away, in a dim bar tucked off Yonge Street in Toronto, Richard Anderson sat hunched over a glass of whiskey. It was barely noon, but his second drink already burned down his throat. The shadows of the bar stretched long across the floorboards. He was not alone. Monica Blake sat beside him, her red dress catching the glow of a neon sign in the window. She leaned close, her perfume cutting through the stale air. "Richard, listen to me," she purred, voice dripping honey. "You're exhausted. You've been through so much. Let me help you untangle things." He squinted at her through bloodshot eyes. "What things?" "Finances, property, all those accounts Sarah left scattered. You don't need that weight, Richard. I'll take care of it. You just sign where I tell you, and you'll have peace again." Richard rubbed his temple, his head pounding. He pulled out his worn wallet and stopped when his fingers brushed an old photograph, Sarah smiling, holding a much younger Lily on her lap. His throat closed. He shoved the photo back and muttered, "I don't know." "You don't need to know," Monica whispered, her hand sliding over his. "You just need relief. One signature, and it's all behind you." She nudged the papers closer, sliding a pen toward his hand. From the far corner of the bar, a woman with dark hair tied back beneath a baseball cap lifted her phone slowly. Detective Carla Johnson zoomed her camera, capturing the entire exchange. Her partner, seated casually with a pint, leaned in to murmur, "We've got them." Just wait for him to touch the pen. The camera clicked, silent beneath the murmur of voices and clink of glasses. Every moment carved evidence into truth. Back in Chicago, Lily sat across from Dr. Leah Simmons, the child psychologist. The office smelled faintly of crayons and lavender. Bookshelves lined the walls, and a low table held puzzles, coloring sheets, and stuffed animals. Dr. Simmons smiled warmly. "Hi, Lily. I'm Leah. We don't have to talk if you don't want to. You can just draw." Lily picked up a pencil, hesitated, then began sketching. A house with 3 figures, her mother in the middle, herself on the left, and on the right, a tall man with his back turned. The lines were uneven but clear. She pressed so hard the pencil tip snapped. Thomas, seated quietly in the corner, felt his throat tighten. He had no words. Dr. Simmons glanced at the drawing, then looked up at Thomas, her eyes solemn. "This child has been through acute emotional trauma. We'll need a full evaluation, but one thing is clear: she needs stability, and she needs it now." Thomas nodded once. "That's why I'm here. Whatever it takes." That evening, Thomas sat by the window of his study, the city lights flickering in the distance. His phone buzzed. A message from Carla appeared. "Evidence secured. Transfer papers, Monica's involvement. We'll move forward. Keep Lily safe. Court hearing set for Manhattan Family Court. Prepare." He set the phone down, closed his eyes, and exhaled. Tomorrow would not be simple, but at least now, truth had a voice. Upstairs, Lily pulled her blanket tight, her teddy bear tucked under her chin. The hallway light glowed, steady and warm. For the first time in days, she drifted toward sleep without listening for footsteps on the stairs. Thomas watched from the doorway for a moment longer before closing it gently. He whispered to the quiet hall, almost like a vow, "You will never be left in the dark again." The polished marble floor of Manhattan Family Court echoed with every step. Morning light streamed through tall windows, dust swirling in shafts of gold. The place felt less like justice and more like a theater, where lives were rewritten in front of strangers. Thomas Miller held Lily's small hand as they entered. She clutched her teddy bear in the other, its blue star faded but still bright enough to anchor her. Each step she took was half a step closer to a future she could not yet see. By Thomas's side walked Michael Turner, his lawyer-sharp suit, briefcase heavy with evidence. Ahead of them, Detective Carla Johnson was waiting. She gave a short nod and slipped Thomas a USB drive. "Everything's here. Video, audio, financial transfers. Monica doesn't know yet, but when the judge sees this, she'll have nowhere to run." "Thank you," Thomas said, tucking the drive into Turner's folder. Across the hall, Richard Anderson arrived with his attorney, Peter Dawson. Richard's shoulders sagged under the weight of his own guilt, though his face was arranged in a stubborn mask. His shirt was pressed, his tie neat, but the tremor in his hands betrayed him. At his side, Monica Blake hovered in her red dress, eyes glittering like sharpened glass. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Patricia Coleman, a stern woman in her 50s with reading glasses balanced low on her nose, entered and settled into her seat. The courtroom stood, then sat. Silence fell heavy. Turner rose first. His voice was steady, professional, but edged with conviction. "Your Honor, we are requesting a temporary protective order for the minor, Lily Anderson. We submit evidence of her expulsion from her home, as well as attempts to manipulate her inheritance through unlawful transfers." He handed over the USB drive. The clerk inserted it into the court computer. The screens flickered, and suddenly the bar scene came alive. Richard, bleary-eyed. Monica pushing the pen into his hand, her voice low and sickly sweet. "You just need to sign." "Richard, I'll take care of the rest." Gasps murmured through the courtroom. Monica's smile stiffened, but she didn't flinch. Judge Coleman leaned forward, eyes sharp. "We will return to that. For now, I'd like to hear from the child." Thomas bent down, whispering into Lily's ear. "You don't need to say much. Just tell the truth. Nothing more." She nodded, clutching her teddy bear so tightly the stitches stretched. When Thomas lifted her onto the witness stand, her small shoes barely touched the floor. Peter Dawson, Richard's attorney, adjusted his tie and attempted to project authority. "Lily," he said with a practiced calm, "sometimes children imagine things when they're upset. Do you understand that?" Lily's eyes flicked toward Thomas, then back to the lawyer. She whispered, "I don't need to imagine. I remember." "Tell us what you remember," Judge Coleman urged gently. The little girl took a shaky breath. Her gaze drifted to the loose stitch on her teddy bear. She squeezed it once and began, "That day. It was Sunday. Mom was sitting on the couch reading a book. Richard, he carried me on his back toward the door and said, 'Let's go find some sunshine.' We went to Central Park. He bought me to vanilla ice cream scoops. One melted into my hand. He laughed and licked it clean, and I told him it was gross, and he laughed harder. I remember that he was my dad then, and then, after Mom's funeral, he told me I wasn't his child anymore. He told me to leave." Her voice cracked. She clutched the bear harder, as though its fabric could keep her from falling apart. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of the clerk's pen. Richard's head bowed. For the first time, his mask faltered. His shoulders shook once, like a man trying to swallow back a tide too strong. Monica sprang from her seat, her voice slicing through the quiet. "She's lying. She's just a child making up stories." Judge Coleman's gavel slammed down. "Miss Blake, sit down or you'll be removed." But the damage was done. Lily flinched at Monica's shout, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. Thomas rose quickly, offering her a handkerchief. He didn't wipe her tears for her. He only held it out until she took it herself, dignity intact. Richard stared at his daughter, and for the first time, his eyes were wet. He whispered so low it barely carried, "My God, what have I done?" Turner seized the moment. "Your Honor, the defense cannot dismiss this child's testimony when corroborating evidence exists." Detective Carla stood, her voice calm but firm. "We have surveillance footage, bank transfers, and witness testimony that prove Monica Blake orchestrated fraudulent asset manipulation and pressured Mr. Anderson while he was intoxicated." The clerk switched to another clip. Monica's whisper echoed in the courtroom, "You just need to sign. I'll take care of the rest." Richard covered his face with his hand. The sound of shame filled the silence. Judge Coleman sat back, eyes scanning the room. "I have heard enough for today. This court will review the full evidence. For now, custody of Lily Anderson is granted temporarily to Thomas Miller until further proceedings. Mr. Anderson, you are ordered to enter an alcohol recovery program immediately. Ms. Blake." She paused, her tone sharp as glass. "You may expect criminal investigation into your actions." The gavel came down. Bang. Relief rippled through Thomas, though he showed none. He only reached for Lily's hand. She slid off the stand, walked back toward him, and without a word, pressed her tiny palm against his dot. Her small steps matched his stride, steady, side by side. That evening, outside the courthouse, reporters buzzed. Cameras flashed. Questions swarmed like hornets. "Mr. Miller, are you adopting the child?" "Mr. Anderson, do you regret your actions?" "Ms. Blake, any comment on the fraud accusations?" Thomas ignored them all. He opened the Bentley door, helped Lily climb inside, and shut the noise out with a soft click. Inside the car, the world was quiet again. Lily turned, eyes glistening, and whispered, "You won't let them take me away, will you?" Thomas shook his head, voice steady as stone. "No, sweetheart, not while I'm breathing." The next morning, the hallways of Manhattan Family Court buzzed louder than before. The previous day's testimony had already spread like wildfire among reporters and courthouse staff. A millionaire stepping in, a little girl's tearful memory, a cousin caught on tape. People craned their necks when Thomas Miller walked in with Lily by his side. The girl clutched her teddy bear, Blue Star pressed tight against her chest. She wore a pale yellow dress Mrs. Green had chosen for her that morning, her hair neatly braided. Outwardly she looked calmer, but Thomas could feel the tension in her small grip, the kind that came from knowing the battle wasn't over. Inside the courtroom, Judge Patricia Coleman adjusted her glasses and called the session to order. Yesterday, we heard compelling testimony from the minor, Lily Anderson, she said firmly. Today, we will continue reviewing evidence and hear from additional witnesses. Richard Anderson sat hunched beside his lawyer, Peter Dawson. His eyes were bloodshot but clearer than before, as though the fog of liquor had lifted enough for guilt to shine through. Monica Blake, however, looked as radiant and defiant as ever in another crimson dress. She crossed her legs elegantly, lips painted the color of garnets. As if court were nothing more than another cocktail party, Michael Turner, Thomas's lawyer, rose. Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Detective Carla Johnson. Carla stepped forward, composed and professional. Her dark hair was pulled back, her badge glinting under the fluorescent light. She carried a folder thick with transcripts and photographs. Detective, Turner began. Can you describe what you observed on the night in question? Carla's voice was even, each word measured. On the evening of April 12th, I was conducting surveillance at O'Malley's bar in Toronto. I observed Mr. Anderson in a state of intoxication, and Ms. Blake placing financial documents in front of him. She verbally encouraged him to sign, promising to take care of everything. The courtroom screen flickered again. This time, the footage played in full view. Richard leaned against the bar, hand trembling around his glass. Monica slid the papers forward, her voice dripping honey. You only need to sign, Richard. I'll take care of the rest. The house, the accounts, no one will trouble you anymore. Richard bowed his head, unable to watch. Monica's lips curled into a smirk, but her eyes darted quickly toward the exit. Detective, Judge Coleman asked, was the interaction documented in its entirety? Yes, Your Honor. Carla held up the USB. We have both audio and photographic evidence. Before Turner could proceed further, Peter Dawson stood abruptly. Objection, Your Honor. The defense maintains that Mr. Anderson was coerced, his mental state compromised. These recordings cannot reflect his full intent. Judge Coleman arched an eyebrow. Noted, Mr. Dawson, but coercion cuts both ways. Sit down. At that moment, the back door opened. A man in his early 40s entered, shoulders tense, avoiding Richard's gaze. He wore a faded jacket and clutched his cap in both hands. Mr. Mark Sullivan, Turner announced. Please take the stand. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Richard stiffened. Monica's smile froze. Turner approached. Mr. Sullivan, can you tell the court why you're here today? Mark cleared his throat, his voice rough but clear. I was there that night, at the bar. I heard Monica tell Richard to just sign everything away. She said Lily was a burden, that Sarah was gone, and it was time to move on. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. The words dropped like stones in still water. Lily's eyes widened, her little fingers clutching the teddy bear tighter. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan, Turner said gently. Monica shot to her feet, her composure finally cracking. He's lying. He's jealous, bitter. He always envied Richard's life. Judge Coleman's gavel slammed down. Ms. Blake, control yourself, or I will hold you in contempt. The room hushed again. Richard suddenly stood, pushing his chair back with a scrape. His face was pale, sweat glistening on his forehead. His voice, when it came, was hoarse, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Stop it, Monica. He stared at her with hollow eyes. She's right. The detective, Mark, even Lily, they're all right. I let you into my life, and you fed me lies. You told me signing those papers would make the pain go away, and I believed you. I chose whiskey and bitterness over my daughter. I told her she wasn't mine. God help me, I threw her out. He turned to the judge, his voice breaking. I don't deserve to be called her father anymore. A stunned silence swept through the courtroom. Monica's face went rigid, her red-painted lips trembling with fury. Lily's eyes shimmered with tears. Not of fear this time, but confusion, as if her heart couldn't keep up with what her ears had just heard. Thomas placed a steady hand on her shoulder. He didn't speak, but his presence was an anchor. Judge Coleman leaned forward. Mr. Anderson, your admission is noted. This court will weigh it carefully in its final decision. Her gaze swept toward Monica, sharp as a blade. And Miss Blake, your role in this will not be overlooked. Outside the courthouse, the sky turned gray with rain clouds gathering. Reporters waited like vultures, their microphones ready. But inside, for the first time in many days, Lily felt something shift. Her world was still fragile, still fractured. But for a moment she could almost believe that truth had found its voice. She whispered to Thomas as the session adjourned, "Is it really over?" Thomas shook his head gently. "Not yet, sweetheart. But we're closer, much closer." As they walked out together, Richard remained seated at the defendant's table, his hands covering his face, the sound of a man finally seeing the wreckage he had made. The rain came down hard that night in Manhattan, tapping against the courthouse windows as though the city itself was listening. After the testimony and confessions, the judge recessed until the following morning. The corridors emptied, lawyers rushed into cabs, and reporters huddled beneath umbrellas. Thomas Miller carried Lily in his arms through the drizzle, her small body wrapped in his coat. She was quiet, her head resting on his shoulder. The teddy bear caught between them like a fragile bridge dot inside the car. The silence felt heavier than the rain. Finally, Lily whispered, "Do I still have a dad?" Thomas looked at her in the mirror. "Yes," he said carefully. "But right now, he's broken. And broken people need time to put themselves back together." The next morning, the courtroom felt different. Richard Anderson arrived without Monica Blake beside him. She had been taken into custody for questioning. He wore no tie, just a plain shirt, and his eyes seemed older than his 40 years. He didn't look defiant anymore. He looked stripped bare. When Judge Coleman called the session to order, Richard stood on his own. His voice wavered but didn't break. "Your Honor, I accept the court's ruling. I will enter the recovery program you ordered. I will face whatever comes, but I only ask one thing. Let me try to make it right with my daughter." Lily's fingers tightened around her teddy bear. She turned to Thomas, searching his face. He nodded gently, giving her the courage to speak. Can I say something?" she asked the judge, her small voice carrying in the hush. The judge nodded. "Go ahead, Lily." Lily stood, stepping slowly toward Richard. Every eye in the room followed her. She held the teddy bear close, then stopped right in front of him. Her lower lip trembled, but her gaze stayed fixed. "This was the last thing Mom gave me," she said softly, holding out the bear. "She said it would keep me safe. But I want you to have it. Not because I forgive you now. Not yet, but because I'll wait to see if you change." The courtroom fell utterly silent. Richard's eyes filled, his hands shaking as he accepted the worn bear. He pressed it to his chest like a lifeline. "I will change," he whispered hoarsely. "I swear it, Lily. I don't expect you to believe me today, but I will show you." Tears glistened in Lily's eyes, but she didn't cry. She simply stepped back toward Thomas, her small hand finding his. Weeks passed. Under court order, Richard checked into a rehabilitation program. He sat through endless group sessions, confessing truths he had buried under liquor. He worked shifts at a small woodworking shop in Queens, sanding planks until his hands blistered, reminding himself with each grain that rebuilding takes patience. Lily, meanwhile, began therapy with Dr. Leah Simmons. At first, she only drew houses and people with backs turned. But slowly, she began to speak about the smell of her mother's perfume, the way Richard once carried her through Central Park, the fear of nights when the hallway light went dark. Each word was a stitch repairing something inside her. One Thursday afternoon, Richard arrived at the supervised visitation center. He waited nervously, palms damp, the teddy bear tucked carefully in a small backpack he had brought. When Lily entered with Thomas, her steps were cautious. "Hi, Lily," Richard said softly, his voice stripped of all arrogance. She looked at him for a long moment, then slid into the chair opposite. "Hi." There was a silence, heavy but not hostile. Then Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out the little silver star Thomas had given her. She placed it on the table between them. "This means someone believes in me," she said. "I'll let you hold it next time. If you prove I can believe in you again." Richard's throat tightened. He nodded, blinking back tears. "I'll earn it," he said. One day at a time. That weekend, Thomas drove Lily to a nearby park. The sky was pale blue, the lake glimmering. Richard met them there, part of his supervised visits. He carried sheets of paper and suggested something simple. "Do you remember Lily?" he asked. "How we used to fold paper boats and float them." Lily hesitated, then nodded slowly. Together, they bent the sheets into tiny boats. When they placed them on the water, the breeze nudged them forward, bobbing gently. One boat sank quickly. Lily laughed for the first time in weeks, a small, tentative laugh, but real. "Next time," she said, "we'll use thicker paper so it won't sink." Richard smiled faintly, tears blurring his eyes. For the first time, it wasn't a laugh laced with bitterness. It was fragile hope. Later, as the sun slanted gold across the water, Thomas stood back, watching father and daughter kneel by the shore. He felt the weight of Sarah's final words, "If anything happens, promise me you'll watch over Lily," he whispered to the fading light. "I kept my promise, Sarah, and now he's trying to keep his." And in that moment, with boats drifting slowly on the water, there was no courtroom, no contracts, no betrayal. Just a little girl, a broken man, and a chance to build something new. Summer settled over Manhattan like a golden quilt, softening the sharp edges of the city. The courthouse sessions had ended weeks ago, but the story of Lily Anderson was far from finished. Every Thursday afternoon, in a sunlit office supervised by Miss Karen, the child advocate, Richard met his daughter. The first visits were stiff, awkward. Richard's hands trembled so badly he nearly dropped his coffee. Lily sat across from him with her teddy bear on her lap, eyes watchful. She didn't say much, only a few words here and there, but she showed up. And that alone was more than Richard deserved. He showed up too, always on time, hair combed, sober eyes. Sometimes he brought paper and crayons. Sometimes he brought nothing but himself. He began every visit the same way. "Hi, Lily. I'm glad you're here." And slowly, brick by brick, something began to shift. At the same time, Richard's life outside those visits was changing. He worked long hours at a woodworking shop in Queens, sanding planks until his fingers blistered, sweeping sawdust until his lungs ached. The routine steadied him, gave his restless nights a purpose. After shifts, he walked straight to his recovery meetings. He listened more than he spoke, but when he did speak, he told them about Lily, the daughter he had almost lost forever. "I don't deserve her forgiveness yet," he confessed one evening, his voice raw. "But I'll keep showing up, because if she can wait for me to change, then I can't waste another day." The group leader placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's the first honest promise you've made in years," he said quietly. Meanwhile, Lily was healing too. In Dr. Leah Simmons's office, her drawings grew brighter. The figures in her sketches no longer had their backs turned. She began to talk about memories without fear, her mother's lullabies, Central Park afternoons, the way Richard used to lift her onto his shoulders. She still cried sometimes, but the tears weren't only of loss anymore. They were part of learning to trust again. Thomas Miller remained at her side through it all. He drove her to appointments, attended every school meeting, and read her bedtime stories in the evenings. But he also gave space for father and daughter to rebuild what had been shattered. He was the guardian Sarah had asked for, but he knew Lily's heart needed her father too. One Thursday afternoon, Richard arrived early for visitation, carrying something in a small wooden box. When Lily walked in, she eyed the box curiously but didn't ask. "I made something for you," Richard said, placing it gently on the table. He opened the lid to reveal a small paper star laminated and carefully carved into a wooden frame. "I know Uncle Thomas gave you a silver star. I wanted you to have this one too, because every time you hold it, I want you to remember that I'm trying." Every day, Lily touched the wooden star with hesitant fingers. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "You remembered?" "Yes," Richard said, his throat tightening. "I remember everything, and I don't want to forget again." Her lips trembled, but this time it wasn't from fear. She reached across the table and placed her small hand over his. "I still can't forgive you today," she said softly, "but I don't want to lose you again." Richard nodded, tears falling openly now. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life earning it." Months passed. One late afternoon, Thomas joined them for a supervised park visit. The three of them stood at the edge of a lake, folding paper boats together. Lily laughed when one sank too quickly. Richard chuckled too, a sound rusty but genuine, when the last boat floated steady. Lily looked up at her father. "Next time," she said, "we'll use thicker paper. Then it won't sink." Richard smiled, his eyes wet. Yes, sweetheart. Thicker paper, stronger boats. Thomas watched from a few steps back, a faint smile on his face. He thought of Sarah's last words. If anything happens, promise me you'll watch over Lily. He had kept that promise. But now, watching Richard and Lily together, he realized something deeper. Sometimes promises don't just protect the child. Sometimes they give the parent a chance at redemption too. The sun dipped low, painting the water in orange and gold. Lily slipped her hand into Richard's on one side and Thomas's on the other. The three of them stood together in silence, the world for once steady beneath their feet. It wasn't a perfect ending. Wounds still ached. Trust would take years to rebuild. But there was a road ahead now, and on that road were second chances. The narrator's voice might have said it best: when a door closes in cruelty, we must find a way to open another in compassion. Forgiveness doesn't arrive in a single day, but love can begin again. Right now. And with the last streak of sunlight fading across the Manhattan sky, Lily held both men's hands tighter, her blue-starred teddy bear tucked beneath her arm, and whispered a promise of her own. I'll believe in you. If you keep believing in me,